Yeah, good morning, everybody. Jamie Wallace here with a Zoom Q&A meeting for you with regards to lesson 6. So hope you all had a nice little Easter break, and we're back for the second half of the course here. So yeah, thanks again for joining me this morning. Today we're going to be talking about lesson 6, which I think you'll find is pretty straightforward and a nice a bit of an easy assignment to get back into the second half of the course here. So we will take a quick peek at that. Let's just share screen here. Okay. Just need to get all my ducks in a row. And what I'll do, we'll just put our Q&A document into the chat. If anybody wants to drop a question there, or can certainly use the chat for that as well, or unmute yourself. But let's take a look at lesson number 6. Again, I think you'll find it's pretty straightforward, and it's got 3 different parts to it. We're going to be looking at the soil mapping. So we're going to take a look at, if you're in the US, we'll be taking a look at the USDA website, which is a huge resource for all of those in the United States. We're going to test our own soil using the jar test method, and then do a little bit of a comparison and analysis, comparing the jar test to what the USDA site has let us know. So what I thought I would do is just do a quick walkthrough with the first part here, the soil mapping. So for those in the US, which is the majority of the people in this group, you're going to want to use this link here. And it's not really difficult. There's a little tutorial at the bottom, but we can just walk through it here quickly for you. So is there anybody on the call that'd like me to would like to just punch in their address into the chat, and I can use your site as an example? Feel free if that's what you want to do. If not, we'll find some random location here. Thank you, Grant. All right. So when you open this link, you're going to come to this page, and you want to tap on this green button here, which will take you to the first step in the process. And what you have to do is define your area of interest. So it's not totally straightforward, but I think what we'll do, we'll just throw in the address here. There we go. So we're in and around that area. And I gather, Grant, that your location is right here, probably in the middle of the screen. So what I will do, I'm not sure about your property boundaries, but I'll just use what we're seeing on the screen here as, let it reload a bit. So the only thing we have to do now is define the area of interest. And what we want to do, we can do that several different ways. Easiest way is to use a rectangle. And again, we can just define it as such. And that's about it. That's all we have to do. We just go to the next tab up on our web page here, and we're going to go to the soil map. And then it's going to give us, well, you've got a lot of different soils within that area. So if we click on any individual, no, it's got us on the left-hand side. So the legend on the left is relating to all of the different soil types on the right here. Probably need to back out a little bit. So that's basically what we were hoping you would take a screenshot of. And then on the left-hand side here, you have all these different soils. So let's say number 19, we wanted to find out a little bit more about that. We would click on that and then get a description of it. And as you can see, it's pretty in depth. What you'll probably find is in this type of a setting, probably the jar test and your USDA map will be reasonably close. When you get into more urban settings where there's been lots of disturbance, you'll probably find that that is quite different, and not to worry about that at all. But yeah, this is the basics. So you can go way deeper into this website and get more information, but it has a lot of really interesting data here that you can at least grab some screenshots from for your assignment. So that's really the trickiest part of the exercise, is finding your area of interest. And the reason you have to do that is otherwise this website would have to display all the soil types within the US, and that would probably overwhelm it. So yeah, so you just want to go again, define your area of interest and go from there. And then if you have any challenges at all, you can take a look at this tutorial. And these are basically a list of information that we're going to want you to put into your assignment. And then if you're outside of the US, then it's going to be, you know, very different depending on whereabouts you are. Where I am in BC here, we have an excellent tool as well. And it's, again, kind of in an ArcGIS user's interface here. And you're going to get a very, very similar result. It's not going to show you the whole province because that's not inhabited, but wherever there's population, you're going to have that. So again, depending where you're situated, there's usually some pretty good information that's online that you can access. And if you have any trouble, you can't find anything, let me know, and I can give you a hand trying to locate that. So that again is the first step. And then the next is the soil testing itself. So we'd like you to take 3 samples and you're going to mark them separately, and then you're going to do this jar test. And there's a couple of different videos here just showing you that procedure, but it is very, very easy. You can just get yourself like a mason jar or a honey jar or whatever you have. And I'd recommend you fill that up pretty close to halfway with your soil sample, and then add water, and you're going to agitate it, and then you're going to let it sit for a few days. And it could actually be, if you have a lot of clay in your soils, it could be a week or so. So it does really depend on the soil type, how long this takes to settle out. But you can say in this image here that there's quite a bit of clay suspended. All the sand and the silt have settled out already, and it's just that last little bit of clay. So it's a good process to go through. And again, it's very simple. The sand is the heaviest of the materials, so it's going to settle at the bottom of the jar first, and then you're going to have silt, and then you're going to have clay here. So the only thing I would suggest I don't know if there's a good photo here. No. Is trying to provide a little bit of lighting on the jar when you take a picture of it, and then I can give you, some reasonable feedback on that. Because here you can definitely see the distinction between the sand and the silt, and then the clay is that little tiny layer on the top. But you have to have a fair bit of light around the jar when you're taking the picture in order for that to be evident. So that's just one thing to consider. And you have your soil texture pyramid here you can take a look at and take a picture of and utilize if you wish. So again, that is a very much a straightforward process. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the mapping or the testing at all? Okay, well, if you do, don't hesitate to drop it in the chat and we can cover off that, no problem. And then the final part of the assignment is just the narrative and analysis. So, talk a little bit about the samples. And then because pretty much no matter what materials make up your soil, you're going to find that you're always trying to build on that. So we want to know what kind of local materials you have that can help build your soil up and some of the limiting factors. So that's one of the things that you may discover during this whole process. You might find you have like a sandy loam that's quite well draining, and then you go to do a infiltration test where you're filling the hole full of water, and perhaps it's very, very slow draining. So that may tell you that you've got some compaction issues, and that's a limiting factor, absolutely. And you'd want to try and rectify that. So we've got a couple questions here. One's from Amber. You're a little confused about how to properly define one of my soil samples. Sample has visible quartz sand grains. But the places in between are very smooth and slippery feel. Do you have a picture of it, Amber, you could share with us, or? Okay, that's great. That is fabulous. Well, maybe while we're waiting on that, we'll just look at Jessica's question here. Samples are just the top soil layer, not below 12-inch. Correct. Absolutely. Yeah, we're not too interested in the subsoil, well, what I would call subsoil at this point. It's that top 12 inches, and most likely your topsoil layer might be less than that, but that is where our concern is. And for the most part, that's where a lot of your activity is going to be with soil organisms. And you have solid clay in some areas. Wow. So great for pond building. But funny enough, a lot of the strategies for clay versus sand, they're very, very similar. And organic matter is often going to be your friend with that. Another part of this assignment that we don't really get into is here we're looking at basically texture, so sand, silt, clay, but probably a more important element is the soil food web. And this is something I always bring up with students because it's, I took some training. I went down this road a little bit. I was going to be a soil food web consultant and decided not to do that. Wasn't really something I could do part-time. I'd have to fully immerse in it. But I've, since I started in the industry, it's always been impressed upon me that, you're really cultivating soil, not plants. And if you get the soil right, everything else is going to follow suit. And it's all of this, the microorganisms that are within our soils, whether they be bacterial or fungal or nematodes, all of these are responsible for cycling nutrients. So you might think you put compost on your soil and that's providing your plants with all of this food. The reality is the compost is providing these organisms with food, and after they digest it, it is available to plants. So it's an important cycle that's going on here. And as most of you know, if you're doing your test hole and you're seeing a bunch of worm activity, that's a really good sign. You've got good aeration, and there's lots of good things happening beneath the soil surface. And they are part of that cycle. There's no doubt about that. So the other thing you could consider, I know I was very interested in soils after I went through my PDC, and I ended up taking some training through Dr. Elaine Ingham's Soil Food Web program here. And I'd encourage you just to visit the website, because there's a whole lot of videos, free videos here. There is, this is a very interesting map as well. If you want to, and I also recommend this, you could take a soil sample and send it off to a soil food web lab. We do that quite often with our projects, and it's a little different process. They are not looking at sand, silt, and clay. They're looking at what is actually alive in your soil sample, and then they also look at what you're trying to grow. It could be pasture, it could be market garden veggies, it could be an ornamental garden. They look at that, and they'll recommend what you need to do to sort of leverage your soil in the direction of the crop you're hoping to grow or are growing. So highly recommend that. You dropped your photo, the Google Doc. Oh, that's a good idea. There we are. Yeah, it looks like pretty sandy material. So you can definitely see the sand coming up to about there, I would say, Amber. Yeah, and that's a good photo. Good for you. That's after sitting for 5 days. Yeah, and then this little bit at the top's organic matter, and then you do have a little bit of clay still suspended. On your other jar here, you can see a lot more clay. But yeah, that's very interesting. So you can always let that sit there for a couple more days, but honestly, it won't add a huge amount to the clay. You can always just, if you need to be working on this and get a percentage going for your texture calculator, then I would just try and estimate what that might be. But yeah, nice shot. Let's see here. I'm not sure I answered your question though, Amber. So are you just unsure about where the sand ends and the silt begins? Is that where those textures are differentiated, or? Okay, well, we'll wait on Amber to get back to us. Yeah, I just want to make sure. Aha. Also just looking how to phrase it. I see. It's not sandy, silty clay. Yeah. Yeah. This area here is a little bit hard to distinguish. Yeah. Well, let's take a look at the calculator and we'll see where we can go with that. I don't have a picture of it. All right. Annotation tool here. All right. So if we take a look, uh-oh. Okay, I'll go back. So it looks like you probably have in and around 50% sand, Amber. Do you think that's about accurate? Yeah, okay. And then it looks like you're going to have 40+% of silt. Is that, would you agree with that? Maybe 45? So you're saying there's two types of sand. Yeah, it looks like there's a little transition right in here. Yeah, so we just want to try and get some rough percentages. So maybe, you know, whether the sand is small or large, we'll call it the same thing. And maybe we'll give it, do you think 60 or 65% sand, and then maybe 30% silt. Let's just presume that was what we determined. So pretty easy to use here. So we go and there's our 60% sand. And then let's go to our silt. Let's say we're 35. And then we have just a small amount of clay. What did we say? 35 and 60. So we'd have 5%. So we just go along and where all these lines meet up is where we're going to be. And it looks like you're in sandy loam. So you'd be right about there. That's how I would read that. Again.
Wait, what?
Oh, sorry, Amber, are you there? Oh, okay. Somebody's in the background there, no problem. Yeah, does that make sense, Amber? So I would say you're sandy loam, very similar to where I live, and you probably have a very high level of percolation when you do that perk test. If you haven't done it already, have you put water in the hole and tested that out yet? And you can unmute if that's easier. Totally, yeah. So slow draining. So that's very interesting. So where I live, and I'm on kind of, it's a sandy loam, but it's almost gravelly sandy loam. It's very fast draining. So a 12-inch by 12-inch hole that could, on my property, that could drain in 5 to 10 minutes, no problem. So if you are having some challenges with drainage, then you have to think, well, it's not the soil texture itself that's causing the challenge. It's probably related to compaction. So if you're on an urban location, let's just get out of this. So if you're in an urban setting, one of the best tools you can use is called a broad fork. And in the Pacific Northwest, this is a very good model here. This is what I have. I don't have it's Meadow Creature probably makes the strongest broad fork there is, and very, very happy with that. So can't recommend that enough. Let's see, Jessica tried to, oh, okay. Yeah, unfortunately, Jessica, when you send attachments through Canvas platform, it can be problematic sometimes. I don't see the link there. Jessica, if you want, you can drop it in our Q&A document. That might be the best idea. If you're able to do that, just pop it in somewhere up here and we can take a look at it, because for some reason I'm not, either that or you can just directly email it to me. So yeah, just shoot it to that email address and I'll get that, no problem. Okay, so Amber had a question here, or a comment. So you dropped a picture of the hole in there too. It's very clay looking. That's why I'm surprised. I see. Yeah, sometimes the color can be deceiving. That looks to me. So Amber, when you were digging this, would you say that it was hard to dig? I see you got some organic matter up high in the hole here and not so much lower down, except you do have a woody, yeah, it was hard to dig. So whereabouts is this taken? Was this, because I'm trying to remember your site, are we on an urban or acreage? On acreage, right? And is this pasture? It doesn't look like there's much vegetation here. It's the front yard, kind of weak growing turf, I would say. Not a lot of soil depth. So a couple things that might have happened here. It may be this area is compacted. It's mostly moss, yeah. So you can see a very, very thin layer of actual topsoil, right? And then you go into this parent, what I would call more parent material. And yeah, it could be that it was compacted during the house construction. That often is the case. Okay, thank you, Jessica. I'll take a look for that. When you, yeah, any new home, it's just really disastrous around the house after construction. And yeah, even in 1910, you know, we're looking 100 years later. It could be that there's just been no relief, right? So once compacted, nature doesn't easily change this. So this is where we have to step in. So on an acreage setting, one of the most effective tools is a keyline plow. And often we've used one a number of times. And the beauty of this is, as you can see with these images, they will, this plow will decompact quite a ways down, quite a ways below ground, and then and leave the surface undisturbed or somewhat. And there's all kinds of setups. This one here has a little roller to push the turf back in, but this is an amazing plow. And you might have to do it multiple times. Like, in other words, you might have to do it. You always want to do this when there's soil moisture. So maybe, at this time of year is ideal. And then you might want to come back and do it in the fall. What the easiest way of determining that is get yourself a penetrometer. I have a brand from Dickie John, and it is a great tool, and it's not too outrageously priced, and it's so low tech. It's wonderful. You just push it into the soil, and you get a reading here of resistance. And I shoot for 150 psi, so I want to see my soils that come in and around that. So once you get over 150 psi, plant roots cannot push through that, or not many. All right, so we've got a couple of things here. So I got, yeah, no problem, Amber. I got Jessica's picture. Right, just share that here. Okay. Okay, Jessica, there's your picture. It looks like you've got, looks like a wet area. What let me get my chat window back open here. What question do you have, Jessica? I see Becca's got a question here. I'll get to right after this. Yeah, it looks like lots of clay. Yeah, if you want to unmute yourself, Jessica, feel free, whatever is easiest. Just wondering what to do. I get some of these marshes to dry up. Yeah, well, that that is a little bit of a bigger picture question. I can see that you've got clay, you've got a couple, maybe 2 inches of soil, and then we're right into some really hard material. And you can tell the roots are not going very deep into there, and it looks like that clay even gets blue. So that would tell us there's no oxygen down there. So beautiful for building ponds. Can you describe where this is, Jessica? Is this in a, it looks like it might be out in a field. You have lots of springs on the hillside. Yeah, I have a spring too that periodically pops up. It's in a field, so it keeps this meadow soggy all year round. Well, before you think about draining it, I would try and get a bigger picture of your, really, your micro watershed in a lot of ways. Like, does this water that pops up in this field, do you think it's coming from another area uphill? It's all year round, so that's wonderful. And I would say this is try and treat this as a resource that you can, it's not really helping the water table below. No, it probably is, but it isn't in this situation for sure. It may be a case where if you're trying to store water, that would be fantastic. I'll tell you what I'm hoping to do with the one we have. We have a little spring that is seasonal. So during the driest part of the year, in say August, it really slows down. It's just a damp spot, and it's really convenient. It pops up in the middle of a ditch that's right at close to our property line. So what I'm hoping to do is build a little bit of a dam, very, very small, and have a catch basin in place, and gravity send that water into a really large rain garden that is going to be close to my wellhead. So that is my plan with that, just because it's, very, very, it's not contaminated by any means. It's not surface runoff. It's below ground. And that I would start considering what you might want to, or what you could possibly do with that, Jessica. You must, I bet you have other areas close by that are maybe the opposite. Maybe they're quite dry in the growing season and suffer from a lack of water. So perhaps this may be a way of helping to store that water. Now, the other thing to consider is we looked at this keyline plow, and that's wonderful, but the other thing we can do with this is what's called keyline design, and that is an amazing process, and not one that we really dive into too deeply with this course. But what one does is yeah, there's not a 5-minute lesson on this for sure. Keyline design, what it is looking for patterns in the landscape. And actually this, this drawing does show us a bit here. So you can see, maybe I'll try and make this picture a little bigger. Nope. Oh, well. Okay. Right here, this area here looks like it's a bit of a valley. So valleys are traditionally wet. They're more damp than the surrounding landscape, because this is where all that runoff heads, right? So it heads into the valley of sorts, right? And then it's going to head downhill. So what keyline design does is it sets up a pattern, and you'll notice these are all even. It sets up a pattern that you derive from looking at the contours of your property. And by using that keyline plow, we are carving, well, we won't say a trench, but it is of sorts. We're using the tines of that plow to create a line that's off contour. And what ends up happening is this will be sloping slowly downward, so that water that hits this key line is going to inherently start to move out to this drier ridge. So right here, you can tell is a drier section of the landscape. And this is generally where you want to get your water to. So with keyline design, it will passively move water from areas that are inherently wetter to areas that are drier. And it's quite a fascinating design process. I'll see if I can find is a big part of the Agrarian work with the Agrarian platform. This is their training platform here. We'll see if I can get a good picture here, because what's amazing, and this is what's happening. Try something different. This is often tied into agroforestry, where we use those rows would be planted with trees, and the alleyways get used for either haying, or I'm just trying to find a good image here. So apologize for scrolling and chatting, but all right, try up here. Yeah, these are kind of showing what I'm getting at here. These are traditional rows, they're not the key line. So when they're done in a key line pattern, what happens, and what's really evident, this is getting closer, is you get very, very even growth through that whole pattern. And on older plantings, it's really obvious and quite startling. So there's a pretty good example. The rate of growth on these patterns is very, very easy. Or sorry, very even. And that is one of the beauties of this system, is spreading that water. And you can see in certain cases where you have older mature stands of trees, you can hear they're growing grain in between. But yeah, it's a fascinating approach, something I'd love to do one day. So yeah, I'm getting off on a tangent here. All right. Let's go back. Okay, so Becca had a question here. Can you show us how to read the soil pyramid again? Sure. Just have to find it. There we are. Okay. So how I do it, I just put little markers. So let's say we were looking at Jessica's soils again here, and we had 60, well, we'll say 65% sand. So I would just put a little symbol there. And then with the silt, let's say we had 30. So that's where the 30 mark is. And then that leaves us 5% of clay.
Wait, hold on, Jamie. We can only see the picture of Jessica's clay, like the soil. I can't see the pyramid.
Sorry about that. Hold on here. I can't even can't hear you properly either. There we go. Thank you for letting me know that. There we go. So I will redo what I just did. So we just start, you can start anywhere. Let's say we're starting with sand. And that's 65 right there, right? And then we'll look at silt. So let's go with 30. So now we're at 95, and that leaves us 5% of clay. So we have our little markers there, and you can do this any way you wish. But we just join those up. So the 5% comes over, and we are back. 65. So we come down here. We're right. We end up right here in that sandy loam position. So hopefully that makes sense for you. Yeah. Oh, lost my chat. Yeah, does that make sense, Becca?
Yeah, I got it. I didn't see the line of like where the 30 was going. So I see it now. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And thanks for letting me know my screen wasn't showing. So I guess some of what I said did not get translated. I was trying to find some good agroforestry images here. Yeah, that was the one I saw. So you can see how even the growth is. And a lot of this has to do with even distribution of water. And because of that, we're evenly distributing our nutrient, because that nutrient cycle is dependent on available water in the system. So Jessica here. So yeah, so with your situation, Jessica, and this is why when we're doing our design work, whether it's urban or acreage, water gets a huge priority. It's the first thing that we look at, is that water layer. Okay, based on lessons, appears that the clay can be the most mineral rich soil. Yeah, I would say that. If you want to hear something pretty incredible, though, I've one of the classes I took with Dr. Ingham, she basically pointed to a shovelful of sand and said that, there's enough nutrition within the sand for the next 10,000 years. So it's just that these minerals and even the clay, the nutrition that's derived from those minerals is not plant available. So you have to have the organisms involved in order to get nutrient cycling, right? Without these organisms, we would be basically dealing with synthetic fertilizers, and that is one of the major downfalls of using synthetic fertilizers, is they kill soil organisms and reduce your opportunities to be to independently cycle nutrients in your landscape. Might be a better one here. There's another one. So yeah, it's a fascinating, and we know very, very little about this even now, even though there's a lot of focus on it. So cultivating soils is definitely something I would recommend you focus on. And part of that, the soil texture is an important piece, but you need to have habitat for your soil organisms, and you need to have aeration. So things like earthworms are aerobic organisms. So you can imagine when there's compaction that occurs in the soil, there's no worms are not going down into that area. So all of a sudden it becomes anaerobic. And much like the image we were looking at, that clay can change color, it can go blue. That's because it has a lack of oxygen. So we want to have within the top 8 inches of your soil profile, the oxygen or the air will exchange in that top 8 inches every hour, right? So there's it's almost like your soil's breathing, right? So again, you step on it, you drive over it, One of the bigger causes of compaction too is rainfall on bare soil. So with that, I'm trying to remember which, here we go. So with, I think this is Jessica's. No, maybe not. No, it's Amber's. Okay. So with Amber's test hole here, you can tell that there's very little going on at the surface. So it's unlikely that there's 8 inches of air exchange per hour in this case. Right. So, but that's what we're trying to facilitate. We want to give your soils and all those organisms the best opportunity possible to thrive. And if they're going to thrive, then it certainly makes your job easier when you start dropping plants in, or you're hoping to grow pasture or whatever it may be. And of course, it's quite simplified, fairly simplified, but those are some of the key things that I would recommend. Let's see here. Becca's got a question. Okay, sorry. Yeah, I didn't realize I was sharing the wrong screen. So when Becca's got a good question here. When you're doing your testing on a property you're designing, do you typically dig holes? Do you do percolation tests, ribbon tests? No, not typically. What we will initially do on a let's say we have a new design and we're starting a new one now, so we'll be going through this process, is we'll go out and document the site. So we'll do some site observations and we'll bring this penetrometer with us. And then we will make note of where we're testing and what kind of measurements we're getting. But where I live, the soil types are, very, very similar. We're on a lot of sandy loam. When we get into valley bottoms and stuff, we know we're in heavier soils. But no, I don't typically do this. If I wanted to gain a more insight into the soils, I'll send off a sample for testing at a soil food web lab, and we have one just across in Vancouver. So it's a low cost test. It's actually cheaper than a traditional soil test, and it's giving us a lot more information. So here's an example. On one project that we were on, and we do a lot of different types of work, but this was a small urban area, and typically, well, what can be typical, our client was obsessed with this little patch of lawn, and had a pretty large garden that was doing really well. The lawn, not so well. So we tested it with penetrometer. So it was very compacted. And we sent a sample off to a soil food web lab and consultant, and they tested that. And the test result showed that most of the organisms in that area were anaerobic organisms, which confirmed the measurements that we were taking with the penetrometer. So we knew we had to decompact the area before we were going to get any improvement growing anything, let alone the turf, which is actually a really hard crop to grow, in that you're encouraging it to grow and then cutting it and then irrigating it, and it's actually pretty crazy. But pasture isn't too much different. You're just allowing it to grow out quite a bit longer, and you have a good use for it. It's mainly for animals. But no, to answer your question, Becca, We don't traditionally do that. But again, that's where the penetrometer comes in. So hopefully that answers your question. Yeah, and we're getting down to the last 5 minutes here. I don't know if anybody has anything they'd like me to go over for today with the last remaining few moments we have. Yeah, if you want, I can give you kind of a glimpse at an example of our work here, what we traditionally will provide for clients. Oh, Maggie's got a question here. Do you have any, Maggie's question is, that's a good one. Do you have any recommendations for picking test sites of your property, different microclimates? Yeah, well, what I would do if you're going to be trying to figure out where to test, maybe there's an area you want to grow some vegetables, right? Maybe you have an annual vegetable garden already and it's not performing the way you think it should, or you want to increase its performance. That might be a good location. Sometimes people will, if they're on larger properties and they have an area around the house that's cleared, sometimes they'll test right at the edge of that clearing as it goes into more a wooded or natural area, just to get a feel of what the native soil profile looks like. It's usually related to wanting to do something in that area or improve it. Like you may find you have a grass area that's not doing well at all, such as in Amber's case, lots of moss and not behaving as you think it should. That's an idea. So just that's how I would approach it, rather than it being random. Think I want to make this better, or I want to add something like a vegetable garden or a food forest, or a new planting. So it would then be a valuable bit of information going into that next phase of designing that space. So yeah, hopefully that helps you with that, Maggie. Yeah, no problem. All right. Well, we got a couple minutes left. Maybe what I'll do is I'll just share this as a drawing we did not too long ago. I don't have time to go through the whole thing. But this is our first step. Actually, it's a sector analysis or sector map or sector compass. So we will traditionally build a base map, do a sector compass, and then we'll share this with our clients and make sure that we're seeing the same things, right? Where they need privacy, where they potentially have water coming onto the property. They might be aware of the wind, they might not be. This is an urban location, so the clients may or may not have that kind of knowledge, and where they get wildlife pressure. And then once we have done that, we will often reference this through the whole design process, because we know, okay, if we are having some flooding here, how can we protect the house against that? This is a asphalt road surface, and if it's draining onto the site, we want to make sure that we're doing all we can to alleviate that. And I'll just show you the first layer. So our first layer is our what we call water layer. And that's where we look at all these impervious surfaces and do our best to make use of them. And in this case, we're taking water off of the roof surface. And the client was crazy about, not crazy, but very, very excited about the idea of infiltrating this water into the ground through rain gardens. So there's a large rain garden in the front and a smaller one in the back here, and some calculations on the amount of potential collection. And this is all in liters. So 109,000 liters is in US gallons, that's probably, 22 or 23,000 gallons. So a substantial amount of water that normally just gets pushed off into a storm drain. And we show roughly where the piping's going to be, the rough layout. We have an inlet and some gravel, so that kind of breaks the force of the inflowing water so we don't get erosion. And then we always put some sort of overflow. And in this case, it's a little catch basin that pipes excess water off of the site into an alleyway. The same here. So yeah, so that's just a kind of a sneak peek at step number 1 and 2 for us. And in other meetings we'll go through more of this, but it looks like we are coming to the end of today's meeting back here. So yeah, thank you very much, everybody. Does anybody have any final questions here before we call it a day? Oh, you're welcome, Grant. No problem. Yeah, thank you, everybody, for being here today. That was great. Good chat about soils. And yeah, I look forward to seeing your assignments next week. And if you have any challenges in the meantime, don't hesitate to drop me a note. Happy to chat to you about that. And yeah, have a great week. And thank you again, everyone. So we'll again look forward to seeing your assignments next Monday.